In the previous lesson, we created a brand new blank document, and now we can start drawing stuff on it. When you're drawing an object, your first thought might be, well, what shape is it going to be? And your second thought might be, what color is it going to be? Or maybe vice versa. Let's take a look at colors first. Down here on the toolbox, we have these two colors. And Illustrator is always looking at two colors at the same time. It's looking at a fill color and it's looking at a stroke color. Now, by default, the fill is white. Now, white is a solid color. It doesn't mean blank or transparent. And then the stroke is black, is a solid black. Now, at any time, you can switch which is the fill color and which is the stroke color using this little curved arrow. And if you click that, you can say, oh, instead I want the fill to be black and the stroke to be white. And, oh, by the way, the keyboard shortcut is Shift X, so you can switch those back and forth. If you choose other colors, and we'll choose some colors in a little bit, you could always get back to the default by clicking. You see there's this little mini me icon here, and if you click that, it'll always bring you back to the default white fill and black stroke. And you may have seen there, the shortcut is D, just the letter D for default. One other setting for fill that you want to think about, and that is, do you want your fill to be solid? You want to see if this box is selected by default. That means, okay, whatever color it is, it's going to be solid. You might have this box selected. That means it's going to be a gradient. We'll talk about gradients later. Or maybe you decide, you know what, I don't want to fill at all. I want to remove the fill, and you can click this slash, and that removes it, and you see there's a slash through it. Now, right now, this box is removing the fill, and you might wonder, well, okay, that's fine, but what if I want to remove the stroke color? Can I do that? And yes, here's what you do. You click this little check to get rid of it. That's one way. Let me click it to bring it back. The other way is bring the stroke to the foreground and simply click it. So now that the stroke is kind of up here in the foreground and the fill is kind of hidden, that means any color changes you do now will be for the stroke. And now you can click that, and that will remove it. You could also have a gradient in the stroke and click that, and that'll happen. Anyway, I want to get back to the default. You see I've made some changes here already, so I could either press D or click this button here, and now we're back to default, white fill, and black stroke. So let's go and draw some shapes. I'm also going to get rid of this because I clicked the gradient, this came out. So we have some basic shapes over here, and the first thing that's up there is the rectangle tool. And you see, like most other tools, there's this little triangle in the lower right corner. That means there's a flyout. If you click and hold, there's a flyout of all these other tools. And we'll go through all of these. So we'll start just with plain old rectangle tool. Now, if you wanted the rectangle, you didn't have to get the flyout. You could just click on it, but I wanted to show you what's there. Also, you click and hold on there, you see at the end there's this kind of little bar. If you mouse over it, it kind of gets highlighted. There's a little arrow. That means you can tear this off. And if you click in this little bar here, all you get the tools underneath the rectangle tool and this little pop-up. And it doesn't destroy anything that's in there. You can still get back in there to use them. But this way, if you know you need to use a whole bunch of shapes, you don't have to keep clicking in there over and over again to get them. Whichever way you want to do is fine. All right, so let's draw a rectangle. When I draw the rectangle, it'll have a white fill and a black stroke, and I'll just draw it right over here. And there we go. Wow, that's gorgeous, isn't it? Now, of course, you can't tell that it has a white fill because it's a white page. So let's go and change the color of the fill. And there are several ways you could do it. And I'll show you a few of them. One way is, take a look here on the control bar, and you have this little button here will control the fill color. This button here will control the stroke color. So if you click this and choose any old color that you want, maybe I'll just choose a dark blue and have a dark blue fill. Maybe I want a light color stroke, so I can click that down arrow, and maybe I'll choose a yellow stroke. And it's kind of hard to see because the stroke is very thin, so over here you can click on this drop down and choose a thicker weight. I'll just click the selection tool and deselect so you can get a better look at it. Also, you might want to zoom in here. Any number of ways you can zoom in. We talked about that in the last chapter. And I'm just going to get the zoom tool and maybe zoom in at the top here. Okay, use the grabber hand. So there's my blue fill and the yellow stroke. I'm going to get the selection tool and select it because I want to show you a few other ways of changing the color. Now again, here my stroke is in the front. So if I change the color, I'll end up changing the stroke color because stroke is in the front. And now instead of using these two little buttons up here, let's go over here to the swatches panel. Over here on the right, if you click this button, you'll bring up color swatches. So now maybe if I choose, let's say, orange or red, I get that color up there. Now if I want to change the fill using the swatches panel, go over here, click fill. Now this color palette tends to pop up, and you could use that if you want. You can choose colors there. But if you go back here to swatches, then again, you can choose a color here. So maybe if I choose, let's say yellow, I get a yellow fill because the fill is up there on the top. There is another way that you can choose a color, and that is from the boxes themselves. Right now, my fill color is up front. If I double click it, now I have a color picker and I can choose a different color. Maybe I'll choose a more of an orange color. And when I click OK, I get that orange color there. And also you can double click on the stroke symbol to change the color of the stroke. When you draw that, let me just get this panel out of the way. You can change the size. You can take one of these handles and drag in the direction of the arrow, make it wider, make it narrower, make it shorter, make it taller. You could use one of the handles in the corner to change in both directions at once. And in addition to resizing the object, you can also rotate it. If you put your mouse pointer just outside one of the four corner handles, you see our mouse pointer changes to a two-headed curved arrow. And now you can rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. Now I'm going to undo that a couple of times. Just press Command Z or Control Z in Windows twice, because you can rotate to a constrained angle. That is, maybe you decide that, all right, I want to rotate this here. Let's stretch this out a little bit to make it obvious that it's not square. I'll zoom out. I'll press Command minus or Control minus. If I want to rotate this to be 90 degrees, I want it to be exact. So what I do is this. I get the rotation handle again, and instead of just guessing how far I'm rotating it, if you start off holding the Shift key down, you notice it rotates in multiples of 45 degrees. If I let go here, this will be an exact 45-degree rotation. If I let go here, it will be an exact 90-degree rotation. That technique works because the Shift key tends to constrain things in Illustrator and in many other programs. But let's delete this. I'm just going to delete this rectangle because I want to show you a few other implications about drawing the shape. Once again, let's get the rectangle tool back. That rectangle that I just drew, I could have made that short and wide. I could have made it tall and narrow. What if I wanted to constrain it to a square? What you do is, again with the Shift key, hold the Shift key down as you draw the shape, and notice that constrains the height and the width, so you know that is a perfect square. You don't have to guess. Now, when you were drawing, whether you were constraining it to a square or not, all of these rectangles that I drew, I was drawing from one corner to the opposite corner. That is, the corner I was starting on was anchored. So let's say if I draw up and to the left this time, I start by anchoring the lower right corner, and I draw until I reach the upper left corner, or down and to the left, whatever. It's always from one corner to the other corner. Just delete that. If you're drawing and you know that you want to draw from the center point outwards in all directions, for example, if I want to draw a rectangle and have the center of the rectangle on this anchor point here in the upper left corner of this rectangle, what I do is I hold down the Option key. That's the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key in Windows. And you see you got like a little dotted box around the mouse pointer. And when you hold down the Option or the Alt key and drag, now you see I'm drawing outwards. So I'm anchoring the center point, and I'm dragging outwards to all corners. Doesn't mean it's going to be a square. It just means I'm going from the center point outwards. You could put those two together. You could draw a square from the center point outwards. Let's say I want another square, and I want the square to be centered exactly at that anchor point. I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key and also the Shift key at the same time, and now I'm drawing a square from the center point out. And I know that the center is positioned exactly on top of the anchor point of that square that's behind it. Now, those keyboard shortcuts will also work when you're resizing. So let's get the regular selection tool back, and I'll click this rectangle here. And let's say I want to make this bigger or smaller, but I want to maintain the current proportions, not turn it into a square. I want to maintain the proportions it has now. So I'll put my mouse pointer over one of those corner handles, hold the Shift key down, and now when I resize, it maintains the proportion that it's in right now. If I want to resize from the center point outwards, I want to make it bigger or smaller, but I want to leave the center point where it is, then once again, I hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key in Windows. Has nothing to do with proportion. I could move it out of proportion, but it's from the center point outwards in all directions. And by the way, these shortcuts are going to work with most of these shapes, not just the regular rectangle. So let's say you wanted to draw a rectangle and you knew that you wanted it in a specific size. Let's just scroll down here. I'm just going to use my mouse to scroll down on the page. And once again, get the rectangle tool. If you know what the dimensions are supposed to be, instead of trying to draw and trying to guess, just click, a single click on the page, and that'll bring up the rectangle tool. You say, okay, well, what width and what height do I want? And you notice you have this little constrain button here, that little chain button. Maybe I'll click that. If I want a square, let's say, I'll go in here and maybe I'll make that 2, and that makes the height also 2. I'll uncheck that. Maybe I want the width to be 3, and it leaves the height alone. Click OK, and now I have a 3x2 rectangle. And this is just a regular rectangle that I can deal with like all the others, move it around, resize it. Maybe I don't want it to be 3x2 anymore. And you'll find also that all of these shapes have a similar dialog box that you can click and dial in the numbers that you want. So this way you can make your drawings very accurate if that's what you want.